America's Scenic Byway program invites all of us to enjoy the less traveled roads that lead to our country's rich history and natural wonders. Today, you are on the Billy the Kid Trail, one of New Mexico's 8 national scenic byways. In the story that follows, you will see the dramatic events that made the town of Lincoln and a certain young man famous, or infamous. Back on the trail, you may visit Fort Stanton, the Smoky Bear Museum in Capitan, and the Hubbard Museum in Ruidoso Downs. Thank you for driving America's byways through fabled Lincoln County, New Mexico.
For thousands of years, these mountains and plains were untouched by the hand of man. The mountains were the domain of the eagle, the deer, and the bear, while vast herds of buffalo grazed on the lush prairie grass. The wolf, his cousin the coyote, and the cougar preyed upon these herds. The timber and mineral wealth of this land attracted both Anglo and Hispanic settlers. The rich pastures of the mountains and plains were coveted by cattlemen and sheepherder alike. Texas cattlemen moved their herds onto the rich grazing country along the Pecos. They found a good market for their beef at the Fort Sumner Reservation. John Chisholm brought his first herd into the Pecos Valley in 1867, and within 5 years had made himself New Mexico's undisputed cattle king. 100 cowboys rode for his brand. Others coveted this open range. Old Hugh Beckwith of Seven Rivers, the Jones boys, the Ollingers, and the 5 Harrell brothers all challenged Chisholm's supremacy over the range. Economic and political life centered in La Placita del Rio Bonito, now renamed Lincoln in recognition of its designation as the county seat of the newly established Lincoln County in 1869.
Lincoln County was the biggest county in the United States. It was as big as Ireland, and it had 1 sheriff. So pretty much there was no law. And so that meant that also pretty much you could do any darn thing you wanted to. And people did. If you carried a gun, that was your answer to any question.
With the Civil War over, there's an explosion of growth in New Mexico. Lots of folks are coming in from the east looking for new opportunities in the west. And of course, coming up from Texas are a lot of Texas cowboys who are going to be working for Chisholm, but they're also establishing their own ranches.
Then the influx of Americans began because Fort Stanton was re-garrisoned after the Civil War. And the California column came in, bringing a lot of Americans. And so the tensions between the native New Mexicans who'd been here all the time and the incomers, if I may call them that, who wanted to take water out of the rivers to irrigate land that they were squatting on. There were little wars about things like that. And then some Texans came up to resettle in Lincoln County, called the Harrell brothers, and they were on the run from the justice of the Texas law and got into difficulties again with the locals, and in the space of maybe 6 months, something in the order of 20, 25 men were killed. There was always the possibility of violence because of that deadly mixture of 95 proof whiskey and gunpowder.
In December 1873, Ben Harrell and several of his cowboys went on a drunken spree in Lincoln. Town Constable Juan Martinez and his deputies ordered them to surrender their arms. A gunfight ensued. When the gun smoke cleared, Martinez was dead along with Harrell and 2 of his cowboys. The Harrells retaliated. The Harrell War was but a taste of the violence soon to spread across all of Lincoln County. Lincoln County grew in these tumultuous years with Texas settlements to the east at Seven Rivers and Roswell, the Hispanic towns of San Patricio in the Ruidoso Valley and Tularosa on the western slope of the Sierra Blanca. but it was to Lincoln, perfectly situated between Fort Stanton and the New Mescalero Reservation, that commerce flowed. The center of this commerce was the two-story Murphy Dolan General Store, known simply as The House. The store was owned by three Irishmen, L.G. Murphy, John Riley, and Jimmy Dolan. They were well connected with political power based in Santa Fe. L.G. Murphy, an Army veteran of the Civil War, had acquired the post-tradership at Fort Stanton. Their warm relationship with officers at the fort ensured their prosperity. With the establishment of the Mescalero Agency, their store in Lincoln also prospered, so that they soon controlled the entire economy of Lincoln County.
They built up an autocracy where they traded crops for credit so that the locals could buy from stores, with a maiden view of capturing government contracts, because the only money, cash money, in this part of the world was government money.
The house prospered by fixing prices on what it bought and sold the locals, by purchasing cut-rate cattle from outlaws and selling that at inflated weights to the Indian Agency, and by offering loans to local farmers and then promptly foreclosing. In the barter economy of the day, the books of the house were the currency of the land. The sheriff and the local court answered to the house. The young Englishman, John Henry Tunstall, arrived in Lincoln in the autumn of 1876. His Harris tweed jacket did not fit comfortably with the style of Lincoln, nor did his desire to set himself as the new overlord of the region. Tunstall partners with Scottish lawyer Alexander McSween, who had come to Lincoln in March 1875 with his elegant wife Susan, and set up a law practice. McSween urges Tunstall to open a mercantile store in Lincoln to challenge the house. The Tunstall store opens in August 1877, just down the street from the house. The building also houses McSween's law offices, as well as the new Lincoln County Bank. A third partner in this scheme is John Chisholm, nominal president of the new bank, who allies himself with Tunstall and McSween in hopes of seizing the beef contracts at Fort Stanton and the Mescalero Agency from Murphy. He urges Tunstall to establish his own ranch south of Lincoln. A savvy young rancher named Dick Brewer signs on as foreman of Tunstall's spread on the Rio Feliz. He hires a tough crew of cowboys for the ranch, for skill with a pistol is just as important as skill with a lariat. Henry McCarty, also known as Henry Antrim, a.k.a. Kid Antrim. William H. Bonney, also known as the Kid, also known as Billy the Kid, was one of these cowboys. His origins remain shrouded in mystery. Some say he came from the Irish slums of New York City, while others claim Indiana as his place of birth. He reached Santa Fe in 1873 with his widowed mother, Catherine McCarty, and her new husband, William Antrim. They followed the mining frontier to Silver City, where Billy, at age 14, was orphaned by the 1874 death of his mother. Antrim abandoned the boy, who fell in with bad company. Arrested for petty theft, he escaped from the Silver City jail and lit out for Arizona. The boy, tough, smart, and charming, found work around Camp Grant, but in August 1877, shot a man in a saloon brawl and fled back to New Mexico. He soon joined Jesse Evans' gang of rustlers. He now took the alias William H. Bonney, although everyone just called him the Kid. Dick Brewer meets Billy at Seven Rivers and persuades him to leave the Evans gang, who had joined up with Murphy, and hire on with Tunstall. Tunstall's days are numbered, for he underestimates the ruthlessness of his rivals. He thought the law would protect him, but the house owned the law in Lincoln County. Sheriff William Brady now moved to attach Tunstall's cattle herd on trumped-up lawsuit writs engineered by Murphy and Dolan.
He thought he was smarter than his competitors, but he didn't quite understand how things really worked out in New Mexico. Because in territorial New Mexico, the 6-gun trumped the law book every time.
On February 18, 1878, several members of Brady's posse, including the deputized outlaws, Jesse Evans and Frank Baker, come upon Tunstall on a mountain trail above the Ruidoso. They promptly murder him. The killing of the Englishman begins the Lincoln County War. Billy the Kid swears to exact vengeance over Tunstall's body. But when he and other Tunstall cowboys reach Lincoln, McSween urges them to use the law. Dick Brewer is sworn in by Justice of the Peace John Wilson as a special constable, with Billy and a dozen cowboys as his deputies. They call themselves the Regulators, and so it began, with both sides claiming that the law was behind them. On one side was Sheriff Brady, backed by the district judge and district attorney, with dozens of Murphy Dolan gunmen serving as his deputies. On the other side rode the Regulators, carrying legal arrest warrants issued by the local Justice of the Peace Court. Before both posses are finished, scores of men will die. Within weeks, the Regulators killed 3 of Brady's men, including Frank Baker, in the Capitan foothills. But they are after bigger game. On the night of March 31st, Billy and 6 other Regulators bunk in Tunstall's store. The Sheriff Brady and 4 deputies make their morning rounds on April 1st. Billy and his companions unleash a volley from the low wall next to the store, killing Brady and Deputy George Hinman and scattering the others. They then mount and ride out of Lincoln. The Regulators ride west to Blazer's Mill on the Mescalero Reservation, where they stop for a meal on April 4th. Buckshot Roberts, a member of Brady's posse, blunders onto the scene, and a gunfight ensues. Mortally wounded, Roberts still manages to wound 4 Regulators and kill Dick Brewer. As Roberts lay dying, Billy leads his companions away from Blazer's Mill and back to Lincoln. On Sunday evening, July 14th, 1878, Billy and McSween lead 40 heavily armed men into Lincoln. They quickly barricade McSween's house. McSween's men occupy Tunstall's store and the Montano and Ellis stores, while Jimmy Dolan and his new sheriff, George Pepin, along with dozens of hired guns, occupy the Murphy Dolan store, the Wortley Hotel, the Torreon, and the hills above town. Gunfire quickly erupts. Just before noon on July 19th, Colonel Nathan Dudley arrives with a dozen of his Buffalo soldiers, 24 infantrymen, and a 12-pound howitzer and a Gatling gun. Abandoning any sense of neutrality, he promptly aims his howitzer at the Montano and Ellis stores.
This shifts the whole balance of power. And in fact, it's Dudley's cooperation with the forces of Dolan that leads directly to the defeat of McSween's men and the death of McSween.
Pepin's men now set fire to McSween's house, and the tide turns decidedly in Dolan's favor. The house slowly burns room to room. McSween collapses in despair. Guns blazing, Billy leads his companions in a breakout to the Rio Benito and the hills beyond. McSween is not so lucky. Attempting to surrender, he's shot down with 5 of his men. A report on the Lincoln County War from federal agent Frank Angle leads President Rutherford B. Hayes to replace the corrupt governor Axtell with Civil War hero General Lew Wallace. He arrives in Santa Fe on September 29th, and on November 13, 1878, declares a general amnesty for all participants in the Lincoln County War. February 18, 1879, Billy the Kid and several companions arrive in Lincoln for a treaty meeting with Jimmy Dolan and Jesse Evans.
Something had to be done, something had to be settled. Both sides realized this.
After reaching a tenuous peace settlement, they stagger from saloon to saloon to cement the deal.
Between bars on the streets of Lincoln, they run into, of all people, Houston Chapman. Mrs. McSween's lawyer, who has been doing everything he can to put Dolan away and to get Dudley court-martialed.
Dolan and one of his henchmen promptly shoot Chapman at such close range that his clothes are set afire. Billy slips away, fully realizing that nothing has changed in Lincoln. The killing of Chapman brings Governor Wallace to Lincoln. He orders the arrest of Dolan, Evans, and others involved in the Chapman murder. He also seeks out Billy the Kid to help him convict the killers. A meeting between the governor and the outlaw youth is arranged at Squire Wilson's house in Lincoln on March 17th. At 9 that evening, Winchester rifle in one hand, revolver in the other, Billy enters the house and meets the governor. Wallace needs the kid's testimony and so offers him a bargain. Billy, despite the amnesty, has been indicted for the murder of Sheriff Brady, and so finds Wallace's bargain agreeable. He submits to a fake arrest and is placed in Juan Patron's house for safekeeping. Billy testified against Dolan, but the deal unravels when Territorial District Attorney William Reinerson, a Dolan man, refuses to prosecute his friend. Billy, seeing that Wallace cannot be trusted, rides out of Lincoln. He and his pals take up cattle rustling to make ends meet. They prey on Texas panhandle herds for the most part, but John Chisholm's cows are a favorite target as well.
The Lincoln County War brought a lot of attention to New Mexico, but it was a notoriety the territory didn't want. There was no way New Mexico was going to achieve statehood when it was overrun with outlaws, overrun with violence. And now, with the Lincoln County War over, of course, there was still Billy the Kid, the outlaw that refused to go away. Billy the Kid was bad for business. Billy the Kid has to go.
Chisholm talks Pat Garrett, ex-buffalo hunter, cowboy, and tough character, into running for sheriff of Lincoln County with the sole purpose of cleaning out the rustlers. Elected sheriff of Lincoln County in November 1880, Garrett is determined to bring in Billy the Kid. Newspapers in Santa Fe and Las Vegas report wild tales of Billy's crimes, and in response, Governor Wallace posts a $500 reward on his head. Garrett lays an ambush for Billy at Fort Sumner, and when the Kid and his companions ride out of a snowstorm into the town, he kills Tom O'Phalliard. Pursuing the outlaws to nearby Stinking Springs, he then kills Charlie Beaudre and captures the Kid, Billy Wilson, and Dave Rudabaugh. Billy is prosecuted for the murder of Sheriff Brady and quickly convicted by a Mesilla jury. The judge sentenced him to hang on May 13th. Garrett confines him in the old Murphy Dolan store, now converted into the county jail. Garrett kept Billy separate from the other prisoners. He's chained to the floor of an upstairs room and guarded by Garrett and his deputies, Bob Ollinger and J.W. Bell. Ollinger was one of Dolan's best gunmen in the Lincoln County War, hates the Kid and delights in tormenting him. The Kid repeatedly writes Governor Wallace, begging him to live up to their bargain, but Wallace ignores him. On April 27th, Garrett rode off to White Oaks to collect taxes, leaving Bell and Ollinger to guard the Kid. Late in the afternoon of Thursday, April 28th, Ollinger escorts the 5 other prisoners across the street to the Wortley Hotel for dinner. Soon after, Billy asks Bell to take him out back to the privy. On the way back, Billy overpowers Bell and shoots him with his own gun. Although still shackled, he grabs Ollinger's Whitney shotgun and hurries to the northeast corner room. Ollinger, rushing across from the Wortley, looks up into the twin barrels of his own gun. Billy gives his old enemy both barrels. Sympathetic townsfolk watch as his shackles are broken. He's given a horse, and he rides out of town. Garrett, with 2 deputies, tracks Billy the Kid to Old Fort Sumner. On the moonbright evening of July 14, 1881, Garrett lay in wait for the Kid at Pete Maxwell's house, where Billy had come to see his girlfriend. 2 shots in the darkness of Maxwell's bedroom ends the Kid's life in the Lincoln County War.
bendito, bendito sea Dios. Los ángeles.
Billy the Kid may have died at the hands of Pat Garrett, but the outlaw youth was quickly reborn as a towering American legend. Countless poems, songs, and novels, over 60 movies, and even a ballet scored by Aaron Copland, all have celebrated his adventures.
Billy the Kid, the rebellious outlaw youth, appeals to people throughout the world. Partially because he is so young, he won't compromise. And in a world of compromise, of course, we always look for someone who fights for justice, who won't back down, who plays his string out. And that's why Americans will always love him.
He is forever riding free across a moonlit landscape, delivering Gunsmoke justice, the outlaw of our dreams.
Walking the streets of Lincoln today is almost exactly like walking those streets over a century ago. It's a time capsule. It's the best preserved town in the entire American West. It's just like it was. When you walk those streets at night especially, when the moon rises over the mountains, when the coyotes wail, when the wind rustles through the cottonwoods, you'll feel that spirit. The spirit of the West.